views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey there, nice to see you again. It's time for the Bronx Buzz. This is BronxNet's program where we talk to reporters, editors, writers, journalists, all different people who are putting stuff out, photographers, filmmakers. And this evening, we're going to be talking to an author who has a new book. It's actually a new young adults book. But before we do that, we are going to talk to the senior reporter and editor covering housing and homelessness for City Limits. Welcome back, David Brand. Nice to have you with us.
Thanks for having me back on, Gary.
David, you've written about evictions and moratoriums. And as I told you before the show, I really follow this stuff. We've had a Supreme Court decision involving this. And I really, I guess I'm thanking my lucky stars that I'm not in the situation wondering if, I'm going to be evicted. I'm just not in that particular situation. But I think if I was, I wouldn't know which way is up. And I have to tell you, if I was a property owner, I also wouldn't know. So maybe we're recording this, let's see, on Monday, the 23rd. If you could tell us where we are at now as we're looking at the potential August 31st deadline in terms of housing, who's in danger, who's not in danger, what are we going to do? Let me know. Thanks.
You're definitely not alone in feeling confused about this. And I think the changing landscape when it comes to eviction protections, going back to right at the very beginning of the pandemic in mid-March 2020, when the state court system and I guess we could say then Governor Andrew Cuomo enacted the first eviction moratorium. That was a little more than 18 months ago. Since then, it's just been kind of a constantly changing series of eviction protections that cover some renters and not others. Now we have the emergency rental assistance program up and running, which is providing back rent to landlords whose low-income tenants weren't able to make their rent during the pandemic, and they have to prove as a result of the pandemic. But that program has been slow to start cutting checks to landlords. And so there's a lot of confusion, but let's start here, I guess. Recently, the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, heard a case involving New York's former eviction moratorium that allowed tenants facing eviction proceedings to present what was called a financial hardship declaration. And just by signing that form, presenting it to a judge, you could effectively halt an eviction. The Supreme Court decision gets rid of that as an automatic stay of your eviction proceedings. And so landlord groups are welcoming that because now they can proceed or bring new eviction cases, but still it's not going to trigger an immediate wave of evictions. And I visited Bronx Housing Court, one of the busiest housing courts in New York and in the country recently, and there weren't many people there. I spoke with people who work at BronxWorks next door, and BronxWorks is officially tasked by the state and by the city to help low-income tenants apply for rental assistance. And they are overlooking Bronx Housing Court. The director there, Scott Arwater, said, once you see this line going down the block, wrapping around the block on Grand Concourse, then you'll know housing court's back. That hasn't happened yet. So there's still, pretty jammed calendars for housing court judges. Things are moving slowly. There are various protections for tenants, even with that Supreme Court decision. I would encourage any tenant who is in that position, though, they receive an eviction notice, they're worried, to contact an organization like BronxWorks, which, again, has a contract from the city, funded by the state, to help people apply for emergency rental assistance. So if you're someone who owes back rent, just simply by making that application, you can not only ensure that rent gets covered, but you also can delay eviction protections. And then if your landlord receives money through that program, the landlord then has to keep you as a tenant for at least one other year. So that's definitely a way to remain in place, to remain housed. And these nonprofit providers in the Bronx, it's BronxWorks, are helping tenants make those applications.
I just want to say as an aside, I think you're the first person I've heard referring to Andrew Cuomo as the former governor. So I appreciated that. It was accurate. I mean, I don't know if you count the days. It's only a matter of moments.
It's like 6 hours from now, I guess. We're recording this on Monday.
That to me, in terms of solving the problem, and not even looking at tenants who could be evicted or who have not been paying their rent, ostensibly because of lost wages or whatever during the pandemic. If you're going to solve this problem, then you need monies to go to the property owners because they shouldn't be hurt, because my vision is they shouldn't be hurt. And if you do, if they are hurt, then you're really because many of them are decent people and decent landlords, you are really going to collapse the housing system because there'll be no way to do it. So as I understand, there's like $2 billion in federal assistance that will help. But then, of course, there's all the talk about the money not getting to where it needs to go. Is that where are we at with that? And is why is it getting so slow? See, and part of that could be what you said, the paperwork here. And I'm thinking from a tenant's point of view to file this stuff. My goodness, that alone is a full-time job to figure out what papers you need. You may need assistance. You may need So I'm sorry, I'm just showing my own exasperation and for the different levels here. So how do you sort out what I just said about making sure that funding gets to where it needs to go?
Well, again, you're not alone in that exasperation because a lot of tenants, a lot of landlords, and a lot of lawmakers are feeling that same frustration. And so there has been, the past 2 weeks, 2 legislative hearings, one by the state assembly, one by the state senate, pressing the commissioner of the Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance, which is the state agency tasked with administering the rental assistance program, basically asking what's taking so long. Applications opened June 1st. That was already later than a lot of people would have liked because the program was created in the April state budget. It took about 2 months to get just applications opened. After that, it took another month and a half for the first checks to go out to landlords. And so right now they have issued, as of I think last Thursday, about $150 million. Sounds like a lot, but then when you look at a $2.2 billion program, it's really only about 7% of the money. Right. And so people are getting antsy. Landlords, like you mentioned, especially small property owners, many have not received rent since March of 2020. This is an opportunity to make them whole, allow them to cover their mortgage, their property taxes, and yet the money is still trickling. So
you use the word trickling, and I was just going to say the trickle down of it. If you look at what the trickle down would be a property owner to say, well, then I can't fix the plumbing in the building, or I can't put up new security doors or whatever it is. I got no money. So I understand that. Now let me just switch gears and look at the perspective from a tenant. I want folks who may not be in that situation, which includes me. I can't deny that. Somebody who's living on that edge in April and hears that the budget, okay, but now still doesn't know what to do till June. And here we are, August is climbing into September when the deadline is there. In addition to living in a situation where you don't have money and maybe you didn't have a job or you lost your job and you're wondering how you're going to pay your rent, you don't have any answers. It strikes me as chaos. And one of the numbers you reported that there were 130,000 pending eviction cases. Mr. Alwater, who actually was on our show many, many years ago, which is how long he's been doing these things, he's totally right. Once the floodgates get open, you're going to see lines all the way around housing court.
Yeah. And that 130,000 eviction cases, that was pre-pandemic. And that's kind of a moving target. And because the Office of Court Administration will say, well, many of those cases that were filed, the tenant and the landlord resolve out of court. The tenant makes the payments they need to make or agrees to leave. And so they don't go through housing court. But still, there was about 50,000 just before the pandemic. And now here we are 18, 19 months later. Landlords have still been able to file eviction cases, and others that would have otherwise filed eviction cases haven't, because they know it's going to take a while. And so, like, why waste your time doing it then when there's all these protections in place? And so I think eventually we are going to see even more that are filed. And I think we're starting to see it now more gradually. But that's what people are concerned about. Landlords not getting paid, tenants facing homelessness.
And I have to tell you, you I don't want to say threw out the number, but you said 50,000. I want all of us to think about 50,000 cases. You know what that's like? It's like the pile of letters in Miracle on 34th Street that they dumped on the court's desk and said, "Here's all the letters from Santa." That is just. So I'm not sure how to unravel this chaos in the long run, combined with what I've expressed: sympathy for tenants, certainly, and sympathy for landlords. One last thing, we got about a minute and a half. There is concern about two things. One is fraud, that people who genuinely do not need the kind of support, and they think it's like a free payday, no rent for a little while. And number two, there may be people who lost their jobs, but eventually did get work, but that got kind of lost. So I hate to use the word gaming the system. I'm sure that there is suspicion about it, and that's also something that's going to have to be unraveled.
Yeah, you hear some of those nightmare scenarios, and there's no doubt about it. I talk to a lot of landlords who have really huge problems with tenants who they say are taking advantage. But I think that's still a small percentage in the long run, and that there are so many people who maybe lost work for a few months, and in that time fell behind on rent. Maybe they got work back, but still owe rent from March, from April, from June, and maybe they can keep up currently, or they can pay a portion, but there's still that unpaid rent that's following them, and that they need. And I think that's who this program is really supposed to help, to really bail out the landlords, protect the tenants.
David Brand, I'm going to say, I'm a big believer in media, and the importance of what you are doing with City Limits and City Limits' commitment to informing the public about this is incredibly valuable. You've helped me understand a little more, and I know for people who want to learn more, it's David Brand and City Limits. Go to citylimits.org. Check when they do topics, go for housing, and you can find out about all this stuff. We need you, David. We thank you so much for joining us. David Brand, senior reporter, editor covering housing and homelessness for City Limits. We'll see you next time when we can catch you on the Bronx Buzz. We'll watch how it goes, and then we'll bring it back.
We'll have to check back in. Thanks for having me, and always great to be here.
Thank you. We're going to take a short break. We're going to switch gears, and we're going to bring in an author who writes for young people, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Don't go away.
We know that people are dealing with the health crisis, but there's also a lot of food insecurity.
We're giving out healthy food options, and that's what's key here.
If you're a senior, you have a disability, they'll actually deliver meals to you.
The residents are anxious, they're worried, they're scared, they want to be tested.
When things were happening in our community, and we couldn't get the help.
There's almost a presumption of criminality that attaches to your skin color.
The site will prioritize those who are at highest risk in the population.
If you feel symptoms and you'd like to visit one of these COVID-19 testing sites here in the Bronx, you may call the State Health Department's hotline.
Important to note about this site is no reservations are needed. This is a walk-in clinic.
A lot of us are out of work and looking for something to do.
We have the machinery and the skills to make large scales of these masks and gowns.
Take care of your people. It's going to go way further than we actually can understand.
Right now, employees like myself are just adjusting to the new reality.
Reporting from Bronx, this is Trans.
Okay, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. We thank David Brand for joining us and talking about a very important issue to so many Bronxites. Now we're going to take a different tack, and we're going to talk about something else very important: young people in the Bronx. And we're going to say good evening to Justine Manzano, who is a Bronx author and really thinks a lot about young people in the Bronx, don't you?
Yes, I do. I write for young people in the Bronx, so I have to kind of keep my finger on the pulse there.
You got to know who they are. So the book is Never Say Never. That's most recent, and there you can see the cover of the book. I have to tell you, the official biography of Justine, and I'm going to read it to you. It says, "Is tough on the outside, but sweet on the inside." And this I didn't quite like, but I guess you think it's okay. It says she's the geeky author of geeky young adult novels. I don't like that. I guess other people understand it better than I do. Just talk to me about who you are, why you write for who you write for, and why it works for you to do these kinds of things.
Sure. Well, the geeky YA author with geeky books is all about the fact that I kind of grew up influenced by comic books and superheroes and all kinds of things like that. And I believe we talked about that last time I was on for The Order of the Key, which was my first book release. And that one was about superheroes. This one's not. But I do like things that are out of the ordinary, things that are different. So that's the geeky side of me. I'm also, I'm so interested in that moment in our lives where we're growing up and we're figuring out who we are. And that is the area of life that we talk about in young adult books. So that's what really, I think it's the most drama-filled and interesting part of a person's life.
Before we get into some of the specifics of Never Say Never, which really is very interesting and it works on any number of levels, just talk to me about an agenda. I'd like to think, you want to entertain and you want to get young people to be stimulated. Is there an agenda in your mind? Like you say, I'm going to write this so young people will react, will learn. Tell me about, as an author, what is your objective, aside from, of course, putting out things that young people will digest, and of course, reading anything is good.
That's true. I'm actually I feel like each book is different, the approach for it, but I know for me, when I wrote my first book, I was talking about people who, when kids want to feel strong and want to feel like they're making their own decisions. And for this book, which is about the child of divorced parents or divorcing parents, and how she navigates that, it's because I was the child of divorced parents and I remember what that felt like. And I know that it could often feel pretty lonely. And I wanted to reach out to the type of people who were going through that now and who could understand that feeling and would not feel as alone because they see a book that's like them.
One thing I'm always interested in how an artist or a writer does their stuff. At least as I now understand, you and your husband are writers, and it was said in some of the materials that you both sit there communicating with with each other virtually or by texting or doing all that kind of stuff. Does that influence your writing, or is that a distraction? Has that emboldened you to be a better writer? How does that affect who you are as a writer?
It's funny because he was a writer first, and I just sort of learned it off of him through time as we were together. And it's just very relaxing to have a partner who gets what you're doing and understands why you need to take an hour to, sitting with your head stuffed in the computer trying to figure something out, or he gets that part of me that maybe someone who wasn't an artist would not understand in the same way. But we feed off of each other. We're very lucky that we are each other's editors and we send each other work. And it's just, there's a lot of even balance that only someone else who's in your
space,
your
so to
field
speak. Yes.
would understand. Yeah.
So I get it. I understand. And so the answer to my question was yes, it has influenced my work. It's
Yes,
made me a
definitely.
better writer and all that. I get that. I want to talk about, when I think of songwriters and great musicians, and they may be 18 years old, whether it be a rapper or whether it be, somebody way back when, like when I was growing up, like the Beatles, they wrote very intricate love songs that would seem to me to be out of their realm. In other words, how did they know that that's how you feel when your girlfriend breaks up or sees somebody else or any of the things that go on? How do you get into the head of people who may be 10, 15, 20 years, I'm not going to start asking ages, younger than you are, younger than we are, and be able to write it in a way that's in their language that they will understand and communicate about?
Well, it doesn't hurt that I have a 12-year-old bordering on a teenager at home.
You get into that head and say, gee, what would she might be? She or he?
But yeah, he a lot of times, like as far as understanding what's important to younger people, it's really just picking his brain. But a lot of it is empathy, and a lot of it is just having lived through things, and you just sort of try to channel that 16-year-old version of Justine that went through A, B, or C, and remember how important these little things like prom or things like that were to me when I was that age.
Or as in the case of Never Say Never, parents who are divorcing and being that age and trying to deal with all the things that puberty means and all the things that, goodness, we know what our middle school students are like, and deal with that and then have that very traumatic thing around you. It was said to me, and my producer, Rebecca Hemick, said that Raven from Teen Titans is kind of a model of some sort. I don't know anything about it. This would well be second and third hand to me. So why don't you talk? Is there a direct relationship? Is it coincidental? Was Justine just kind of stumbled on something? Tell me a little bit about that.
That wasn't intentional. This was
not intentional.
The Raven from Teen Titans meets Bridget Jones comment actually came from one of my critique partner, who I work with, that I send stuff to as I'm coming up with ideas. And she just said that the voice and the tone of the story just really struck that. And then I saw it, and then I couldn't get away from it because the character.
Well, then you were trapped. Oh my goodness.
It was so funny because I love that character because she's very deadpan and very serious and sarcastic and just, really, I mean, kind of a like bummer type of character sometimes, but it's because she's going through serious stuff. And the way she looks at the world is very sarcastic and kind of edgy. And Bryn, my main character in Never Say Never, has been sort of put in that place by the way her life has been going. And so she's extremely sarcastic and dark in the way she looks at things and can be kind of mean sometimes because of it. But I didn't see that. I wasn't writing towards that. It was just something that kind of came out of it that someone noticed. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll take that. That's a good one.
we have so many different levels. And I mean, you look around me, I've got many Bronx books around me. We have authors write all kinds of things in the Bronx. To me, this is so important to write things for young people that talk about issues that they have to deal with in their language. So this is a question I have no idea if I'm out of bounds for asking. How do we get you into an English class to guest lecture about the book and have the kids respond to it? And do you do that stuff? If not, I'm going to call all my English teacher friends and say, hey, you got to have Justine in there. Let them talk to
English teacher friends.
What's that? You want me to call my friends?
Yeah, I would love to talk to young people about this. I've been kind of limited because of the fact that, we're doing the whole pandemic thing right now. Yes. And so I haven't really had the opportunity to get out there with the book.
It's just an idea I had. I'm sorry when I'm talking. This is what we need for our kids. Let them read, let them learn, let them meet somebody who's Bronxite like Justine. And that's what we got to do in our classroom.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
There you go.
Love to do. No, seriously, I love to talk to kids, and I'm definitely try not to feel like too far away from them. I know that sometimes people can be a little difficult to reach for younger people, and
especially now, man. Of course.
Yeah, I'm the most laid back person you'll ever.
We're almost out of time. I want to just do a couple of things. Number one, how long does it take you to write this one? And do you already have the next one in your head, or do you have to clear it all out and then get started? I just want to measure what kind of a writer you are.
It took me about 6 months to write this one.
Wow.
But the one before it took me years. So I now have learned how to streamline the process. I already had the next one in mind as an idea, but not in anything concrete. Like I still had to outline it and things like that. I just sort of knew what it would probably be about.
And so do you have the next one in your mind? Like that's what I'm going to write about, or are you going to clear out and get started?
I have the next one because in the time that it takes to get it to publication, I have the next one in.
I knew you did. I knew you did. I know just from talking to Justine a couple of times. I know she's always creating. Listen, so where can people find Never Say Never? Wherever books are sold?
Wherever books are sold. However, I do signed copies for Boogie Down Books in the Bronx.
Oh, you see, you are out there in the Bronx talking.
I am in the Bronx. Yeah, so they have signed copies via order. I think they have some in their pop-up shops as well, but definitely if you order online, you can request a signed copy and I'll get that signed for you. And it can be personalized too.
Justine, you get the applause for the day. We need this so bad for our kids right now. There's the book, Never Say Never. You can order it. Let's get all our kids reading and talking and even meeting people face to face so they can understand, what it is to be a writer. Justine Manzano, you're invited back when the next one comes. Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right. That's all. Thank you to David Brand. Thank you to Justine Manzano. Thank you to our great producer, Rebecca Hemick. And we're going to see you next week.